as you know, I'm going to talk about practicing nonviolent communication, speaking a language of peace in the classroom, in society, actually wherever we are. Thinking about ways that we can respond in a peaceful manner, either in our thoughts or in our actions or with what we say, no matter where we are. This is pretty radical. No matter where we are, no matter who's there, no matter what's being said, or no matter what's being done. To think about, how could I respond peacefully in this situation? And also to think about ways that language, because you probably didn't listen to the audio that's on the website, but I said in there that I'm very, very passionate about language. That's like the thing I'm most passionate about. The ways that our language can bring peace, connection, and power, or violence, division, weakness, and fear. And it's just really interesting to think about language. And of course, what a time to think about language. All the language is bursting out all over these days. So many interesting things. So it's a great time to think about this. So first of all, we're going to talk about our desire for peace and the ways that language can influence the peace that we experience. Components of nonviolent communication, that's the most important part. The work of Marshall Rosenberg and what he described as nonviolent communication. And then ways that we can use these components in our own communications and applications of NVC in places that we live and work. We won't have time to do much with that because that kind of involves a workshop, and this is a talk. So if we're in a 3-hour workshop, we could really focus on ways of practicing this. And I'd be glad to give a workshop to anyone who would like it because it's really fun. So first of all, just to say that we desire peace in our lives, when I wrote the abstract for this, for Kevin and Rebecca, I said, we want to live in peace. We strive for peaceful engagement in our families, communities, schools, the nation, our nation, whatever our nation is, and across countries. And there are strong calls for peace within our communities. In the education community is mostly what I'm going to show, but all over there are strong calls for peace. So just to show you a few, and this is really only, it seems like a lot, but it's really only a few. So there are initiatives, the Alliance for Peace Building that does amazing. Oh, I also want to say hello to my friends who are out there, because some people out watching virtually are people I know, and the rest I want to get to know you. So hello. Alliance for Peace Building with their sustainable development goals and so many things they do. I just went to their conference in October. Are we still in October? Last month, and it was just astonishing. They have a specific project now called Rewiring the Brain for Peace, where they're looking at all the brain studies they can find to see where does peace reside in the brain, how can we build peace in the brain, because where we are in our brains, as you know, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about that, determines how we're going to react. This is very interesting, Campaign Nonviolence, and I put the websites on everything so that you can see it. A conference that just happened at Northern Virginia Community College teaching about global conflict and peace building. So events, initiatives, I'm sure you've experienced some of these, and they keep coming out all the time. Also publications, I don't know if you know Joe LoBianco, who's a language policy person, but he's written a lot. He's continually writing about conflict, language rights, how to build peace through solving language problems. He's usually talking about the language of education, the language that people are allowed to use. He's talking about choice of language more than the things I do, but he has this publication at the Center for Applied Linguistics that you can access, and others. Also, you've probably used the book Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott, used a lot in the workplace, Achieving Success at Work and in Life, One Conversation at a Time. This is a very interesting book that my husband David, that's my husband David right there in the blue shirt, that he's been reading, 8 Cultural Conflicts That Make Us Who We Are. And it's talking about cultural conflicts in all different settings. It's a very interesting book. Healing the Heart of Conflict by Mark Gopin, who has a Center for Peace Building at George Mason University. I just ran across this book. The thing is that if you start noticing, you just see books popping up all over. Johann Galton, I think, is European, and Joe LoBianco told me about him and about his book. The Art of Intergroup Peace, I learned about that through the Alliance for Peace Building. How many of you know Rebecca Oxford's book, The Language of Peace, Communicating to Create Harmony? Do you know this book? You don't. You know it, Rebecca? This is the book that got me on thinking about this topic and wanting to talk about it, because she is talking about ways that we can bring peace in all of our engagements. She talks about inner peace, interpersonal peace, intergroup peace, etc. in the United States and around the world. And I'll say something about that in a second. I'm going to go back to that. But that's where I said, okay, let's do this. This is important. Also, I just keep running across new books written by educators, culturally sustaining pedagogies. I just saw it the other day. Anybody know this book? This is a book that's been out for a long time, Social Justice in Language Teaching. Many of you probably remember Nina Wallerstein's book, Language and Culture in Conflict. So interesting that, right, she did write that. But what I noticed is that many of them do not focus specifically on language. So look at your handout on page 2, and there you can see a number of statements, initiatives about peace building. Is there anything that stands out to you? Just anything where you go, oh yeah, just yell it out. Anyone. Marietta, did you notice?
Creating harmony on campus.
Creating harmony on campus. Yes. Anything else stand out?
I like the phrase, replace fear with curiosity.
Replace fear with curiosity. I like this one in education, the art of getting opponents to we. And I was thinking, I just noticed that the other day, and now I need to go back and read the article, which I haven't read for a while. Well, what about getting myself to we? Am I only worried about getting my opponent to we? Anyway, I think that's interesting. Anything else that stands out to you as powerful, interesting?
Building awareness.
Saying what you mean.
Yeah.
Without being mean.
Yeah, exactly.
What were you going to say?
I just said bullying awareness.
Bullying awareness, yes. And just today, I read an article about safe zones. So the idea of safe zones comes up all the time. So we see a lot here in many different realms, a desire for peace. So now to say, still we find ourselves in conflict. Does that make sense to you? Do you ever find yourself in conflict? Even though we're thinking about peace all the time, we find ourselves in conflict with, conflict is in the news all the time, but with our kids, with whoever we're living with, whoever we're trying to work with, we have a sense of conflict. So at the top of your handout on page 3, I was at the Alliance for Peace Building Conference, and I was just surprised when one of the speakers said, conflict, division, and polarization are on the rise. Wow, that's a little bit troubling, scary. I don't know about scary, but wow, I couldn't believe that a person said that at the Alliance for Peace Building Conference. But So in education, for example, we see this is taken the form of concepts, and these are not on your handout, I'm just saying concepts, free speech, academic freedom, political correctness. All of these have been discussed, are being discussed. Use of terms, microaggression, male bashing, gender antagonism, arguments about names of schools. One just got solved, Jeb Stewart, Justice High, right? I think. Justice High School now? Jeb Stewart High School?
Yes.
In Falls Church. Arguments about names of schools, school mascots, school events. We've seen plenty of those recently. Arguments about school events. Who can come? Who can't come? What's going to happen there? What are we going to wear there? And these result in dynamics which are very interesting, described as subtle bias, group hate, when members of one group feel threatened by another group, and so their prejudice against that group increases because they feel threatened. Perception of threat. The belief is there even if the sense of threat is not true, and there's no evidence of danger. There's still a perception of threat. So all of these are part of our dynamics. And many of these dynamics are listed on pages 3 and 4. Once again, just take a quick look and just yell out for us anything that strikes you, that you find interesting. You said bullying, but also cyberbullying is on here.
But it says people.
There's a pretty powerful quote on page 3 that says, "Teacher education is a woeful enterprise today, beaten up and kicked about needlessly." Oh my goodness, do any of you feel beaten up and kicked about needlessly? Most of the time? All the time, okay. Anything else strike you on pages 3 and 4? Any phrase? Sorry, a bunch of stuff strikes me, of course, because I made the handout. Resist movements. Resist. We're hearing resist all the time. Fight back. Rachel, were you going to say something? Decline of civility. Yes, Deborah Tannen talked about that on the talk show. Anything else?
The idea of educators and researchers fighting back against aggression. It seems to be adding more aggression into an already aggressive situation.
Right. Is that helping? You have to ask yourself at some point, does this help? Fighting back, and then now I'm going to have to fight back again. Okay, so thank you for that. So right now we're going to focus a different focus, and focus for a little while on the language that we use. And what I meant to say before, but I wanted to save it, is that in the publications I showed you, even in Rebecca Oxford Carpenter's book, I was thinking, but how do I know exactly what to say in this situation that would help or that would not help? And that's the thing, is that we can be in a peace negotiation, and we suddenly find that we or somebody else said something, and before we know it, we're in a fight. We're in a battle, and we don't know how to get out of it. So Marshall Rosenberg Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, here's his picture. He was a psychiatrist for a long time. He studied under Carl Rogers, and in his life, he noticed that what he calls our habitual behaviors can result in conflict and pain. Even himself, as a psychiatrist, he said once, I used to live in Detroit in the 60s and 70s, and it was a pretty, could we use the word violent? It was a challenging place to live. And somebody would drive down past me on the street, and I would yell out, "Idiot!" So then I decided I didn't want to live that way anymore, so I went to school for 15 years, became a psychiatrist. The other person would be sitting across my desk, and they would have talked to me, and I would listen to them for many days, and then I would say, psychopath! He didn't say it in that way, of course, but what he had done was to give that person a diagnosis, a label. Now, the person who's meeting with him is a psychopath. So he said, I didn't want to do labels anymore. I didn't want to do that, labels and diagnosis. So he founded the Center for Nonviolent Communication. It's in California. The webpage is on your handout, on the last page of your handout, and a lot of resources that they have. Also, if you're interested, I noticed when Kevin sent out the announcement about this talk to one listserv, somebody on there said, oh, Marshall Rosenberg, we know all his stuff, just watch his TED Talks, and you'll have it. Oh, I thought I put the URL, but that doesn't matter. If you want to watch his TED Talks about nonviolent communication, has anybody done that? Did you guys do it? No, so see, oh, David did because I made him. We watched it. We watched it together. You chose to. They're very, very interesting, but it's a lot. It's like he did a whole day workshop and they filmed the whole thing. So you can watch him on TED Talks. Also, BBC Radio, I don't know if you've heard about this series called Great Lives. Tony Hawks does great review of Great Lives, and he does one on Marshall Rosenberg, which is much more reasonable. It's 30 minutes, and it's very nice. So what Marshall said was our learned patterns, and I bolded our learned patterns because that's kind of the key. These are things that we don't realize that we have. Our learned patterns of defending, withdrawing, or attacking in the face of judgment and criticism can be violent and life alienating. Alan Dayhoff is a person I have met recently. He wrote a book called Church in a Blues Bar, which is really interesting. But he wrote his doctoral dissertation on confrontational monologue, and he talks about our strike before being struck style of talking. And you could add to that our strike after being struck style of talking. Oh, you said that? Okay, now. So Marshall says, well, we may not consider the way we talk to be violent, because how is that violence? Our words often lead to hurt and pain for ourselves and for others. So in that sense, they are violent. So then he says, there's another way we can do this. Instead of using habitual automatic reactions, where you say something and I say something back, our words can become conscious responses based on our awareness of what we're perceiving, feeling, and wanting. We can express ourselves with honesty and clarity and also be respectful and show empathy. The form is simple yet powerfully transformative. And I will say that what I'm going to tell you sounds really simple, and it's not so simple. As David can tell you, if you want to ask David about his interactions with me. I've been working on this for like a lot of years, and it takes practice. Also, it takes choice, which I think is interesting, to be reminded that we have choice about how we're going to respond. I don't have to respond in any way. I can choose the way I respond, and the choice I make is going to determine whether I make matters better or worse. And Viktor Frankl said something about choice as well. Everything can be taken from us but one thing, our choice about our own attitudes, to think about the way we view the world. Also, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi mentioned choice kind of in a different way. This world is what we have made of it. It's ruthless, he calls it ruthless, because we made it that way, and we can change. We can change our attitudes, we can change, and if we change our attitudes and our language, we can change our world. This is also, I just want to let you know, because some of you work in education, you all work in education, that some people have laid out this model of Marshall Rosenberg's in books for children, and the compassionate classroom, relation-based teaching and learning, and also the no-fault classroom, tools to resolve conflict and foster relationship intelligence. they have a lot of great exercises that you can do with children. I'll show you one of them later. Now, so just to picture this for ourselves, that what we're saying is that the way we use language can result in conflict, straight-on conflict, running away because of pain, judgments, fear, or I like this is the logo from the Center for Nonviolent Communication, but I like the flow that they show, where we're flowing together in harmony, in cooperation, in creativity, and we're really flowing together, and you'll see how some of that works. And I just put these up to say that this can happen. This conflict, separation, attack, or flow can be happening within ourselves, in pairs, friends, whatever, in our groups, whatever groups we're in, whether it's work, whether it's just friendship, whether it's at a party, in our country and around the world. It's just good to remember that these can happen at all levels. So now, some considerations, because people mentioned these to me, and so I want to just say,
It's delayed.
well, first of all, let's say it's not a formula. This is not a formula. It might sound like a formula, and some people, when they first learn the components of nonviolent communication, we end up talking in a formula, and then we realize, oh, that didn't go very well. We need to change the way that we do this according to the country, the culture, the language, the groups we're working with, and also whether this person is going to be able to hear what I'm ready to say. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it would be better for me to just think it, what I would like to say, rather than say it. I have to think about that. So we change according to the groups. Tone of voice and body language play a significant role. You know that, right? Why did you do that?
I'm sorry.
Wow. Why did you decide to choose that instrument? That's so interesting. Do you notice tone of voice and body language? Well, I did use a few different words. I should have said it the same way. But anyway, you know how that makes a difference. Not everything can be solved through talk. That's what people keep telling me. Joy, don't think you can just talk and change the world because there's violence out there. Yes, true. But talk is a big part of it. And there is a lot more to do. I already said that. There's so much more for us to think about and do. Okay, now what I'd like you to do, you have a worksheet there. And I'd like you to take that worksheet and just think of an interaction or a relationship, either a relationship or an interaction. That's challenging for you. Let's say not a relationship. We need to be more specific. A situation or an interaction that you either have found or find challenging. Someone is talking or behaving in a way that you don't like, and you feel some distress or pain. Now let's make this on a scale of 3 to 5. Let's stick with 3 to 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. Because if we go up into the 8, 9, 10, we're going to have to spend a week together. And we only have an hour, okay? So let's go down here and just write your example on your worksheet. I'm giving you 3 minutes.
Did you share this link? Then. Can you go here? Can you go here? Yeah, open it. This is the... Where is it? Go down. Wait, where is it? Go up. I'm sorry.
Play your instrument. Thank you. A lot of people talk about the power of playing instruments together, dancing together, particularly when there's a stressful situation. And you just say, okay, let's just stop a minute. And let's, Francois Beausoleil plays the drums, and everybody starts playing their drums, which is why I bought those little, or dancing, because it changes the mood. Did anybody feel different?
Yes.
I mean, if we were standing in a circle, it changes the mood. We've come together, and Mark Gopin calls it synchronistic activity. We've become synchronistic now. We're together again. Okay, please find a person who you don't know very well. You don't work with them. You don't see them too often. I know you guys know each other pretty well, but there are a few people that came with me that you don't know. Just stand up, find that person, and each of you take 1 minute to read your example, your situation. Okay, so the minute is starting.
That's it.
Okay, I'll start the minute now.
Yes.
It's because of the live streaming, it's going slow.
Situations like you listen to the media,
Let me ask them, let me communicate with them, and you can run back and see if you can view it from the screen.
Oh yeah.
Is that okay?
ignorance of something.
Because
all the slides are
Okay,
has
you
been
have
sent
to
already to
switch.
the email. So if you register, in his email he will be receiving the slides. It's not through the drive.
he's not able to watch the live streaming, right?
Actually it's a good question. Just ask him if he's able to watch it, and then we can email him the slides later on. Just keep typing, it will show up. Too much.
I first said discovered and then I rewrote it to say two answers. And I know
Yeah, he wants those slides to be permission. Apply permission.
If you give permission, he can access.
Okay, did you both get to talk?
You restricted access. Why are you restricted?
Go back to your place and play your instrument.
I think we
So if you want to share, then you want to add his email address and then
you have to open it and get it.
Thank you. I wish we could just stand in a circle and sit in a circle and do that for a long time. It's so much fun. Now, if we had more time, I would let you read your examples.
specific people can
But
access.
we don't, so I'll just read mine, just so you get a sense. So here's mine, and I got this example from someone in a workshop who told it to me, and I thought, wow. So I have a student, Sally, who's very difficult. She's making it impossible for me to teach. She doesn't want to talk
Or
with
anyone
me
with the
or
link.
work with others. When I give her an assignment or ask her to work with a group, she turns away and refuses to talk with me or with anyone. She's rude and uncooperative, and I don't know what to do. I can't work with her. I wish I could transfer her to another class. Actually, he and I met after the workshop to talk that through. Okay, so now let's look at the 4 components of NVC. There are 4: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And if you need a simple thing to say, you can just say Offner. That's what my daughter says. Oh, I know Offner. I go, Nicole, how would we like to talk about that right now? I know Offner. Anyway, the first one is making observations. So we've already said that our language is often full of judgments, labels, blame, criticism, insults, diagnosis. So defining terrorism, let's define it. What is it? Is it radical Islam? Is it violent extremism? Or who's to blame for this? There's so many of these examples out there now that I thought, you know what? I could collect them all, and that would be astonishing. And I thought, well, why would I want to do that? But anyway, there are many, many examples, as you know. In school, for example, he's so lazy. She's a narcissist. Have any of you heard people call other people narcissists?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a word that's out there. She's such a narcissist. What? She's so mean. His expectations are, what?
That's what you said about the president, right?
Yes, exactly. His expectations are unreasonable. Oh, they don't care about their children's education or success. Have you ever heard about that?
Yeah.
And this last one I wrote because I actually thought it once while I was walking through school. The people in this school are so rude. They push their way in the morning, talk loudly in the halls, and slam their lockers. I'm so sick of it. Oh my gosh. Okay, I read my example already. Here's my example. Sorry, I read my example. And as I said, it would be wonderful to hear some of your examples. So, would 4 people just read these? Read 1, 2, 3, 4? These are quotes from Marshall Rosenberg. Could you just read the first one?
Yeah, when you judge others, we contribute to violence.
Enemy images are the main reasons why conflicts don't get resolved.
Enemy images. Big term. Enemy images. I have so many enemies. In fact, everyone's enemy.
It's too long for me.
Okay, who wants to read it? Rachel, you read it.
All violence is the result of people cheating themselves into believing that they are my pain. Drives people to
My pain comes from you. It's your fault. It's your problem. Okay, last one. Somebody? Anybody?
Such analyses of other human beings are tragic expressions of our own values and needs.
Tragic expressions of our own values and needs. Why are they tragic? Because it's highly unlikely that our needs will be met when we express ourselves in that way. That's why they're tragic expressions. So Marshall differentiates between moralistic judgments and value judgments. So we have value judgments. There are values that we hold. Peace, security, love. Moralistic judgments are when we decide that I'm right and you're wrong. I'm good and you're evil. Yeah? Also, positive evaluations, he says, and I can see this, can be just as unhelpful as negative judgments and labels. A person does something. Oh, you are awesome. You're awesome. Our kids hear that all the time. I got a little sick of our daughters being called awesome all the time. But what does that tell me? So it's so much more life-giving to be able to say, I really enjoyed the talk that you gave last month about student engagement, and I learned that this, and this, and it met my need for clarity, for examples. Comparisons. Dan Greenberg wrote a book, How to Make Yourself Miserable. And he gives examples of how to make yourself miserable. So here's exercise number 1. There's a person here standing with very little clothes on, like just, bathing suit or something. Just put that amount on, that amount of clothing. Hold the book up. Look at them. It's a very beautiful, fit person, by the way. Look at yourself in the mirror, and how do you look? And then he says, but never mind. Beauty's only skin deep. Here's another one. Mozart, by the time he was 12, had written so many symphonies, performed in so many places, and played, in so this, that, and the other thing. How old are you? And what have you accomplished? Yeah. Now, the thing is that those are pretty funny. They're actually quite hilarious. But, we make comparisons all the time. And there was an article just recently in Time magazine where the writer was saying, she was talking about the year of the improbably old but still indomitable athlete, and where does that leave us? And she was describing athlete after athlete and how old they were. And then she was saying and what am I doing? What are you doing? So it was a comparison that's just kind of unhelpful. In your handout, I started looking now at research that people are doing that coincides with these principles. So if you look starting on page, sorry, I've got to find it. Starting on page 8, I started collecting articles about this, about these dynamics in educational research. And there was an article recently about an experiment that people did where they gave students excellent essays as a model for excellent writing. The students in the group that got the models of excellence were more likely to either drop the class or to get a very bad grade on the paper, because what they did was to compare themselves to that model of excellence and say, I could never do it. So I think it's just worthwhile always to think about comparisons. We have to compare, of course. I mean, there's the Olympics, there's politics, there's elections, there's who's going to run the country. There's all kinds of places where we have to compare and somebody has to be number one. But it doesn't have to be everywhere. And sometimes we're causing harm by doing it. Metaphors. Many of you know the book by George Lakoff, probably Metaphors We Live By. I've been noticing lately that sometimes these metaphors are not so helpful. Have you ever noticed that? Like, our backs are against the wall. What? We can't do that. We can't make a decision on this. Our backs are against the wall. Or what's another one that I just read recently? I wrote it down. Sorry. I want to read these. Oh, they're fueling their own fires. They're fueling their own fires. Well, we managed to dodge that bullet. What? Who's talking about bullets? Oh my goodness. Okay. So what we have instead of these is the option of observing. Clearly observing, what are we seeing, hearing, or touching that is affecting our sense of well-being without mixing in any evaluation. So what am I seeing? So I've got to speed it up here because we're supposed to be discussing by now. John always gets angry for no reason. Is that an observation?
No.
Not really. What do you mean by he gets angry? What do you mean for no reason? Doesn't he have a reason? What about yesterday evening Nancy was biting her fingernails while we watched television?
That's an observation.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go fast here. So I could give my example. I should read my example. I changed my situation into an observation. Yesterday, and this is what I asked the teacher to do, who I was working with. Yesterday, I tried to have students work in groups of 4. I tried to put Sally with Patricia, Bill, and John. Instead of joining the group, she sat at her desk and worked on the assignment alone. Is that an observation?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't call her difficult, rude, and uncooperative, because how do I know? All I did was to describe the situation. Okay, good, it flipped way ahead for me. That's good. Okay, the next thing, we've done observations. Expressing feelings, emotional states, or body sensations. How am I feeling now? Now, you may be thinking, wow, what a flake. She's talking about feelings. But I just want to tell you, if you start thinking about it, it's a big deal to ask yourself, how am I feeling now? Because we so often tend to think, I am so angry. You make me so angry. Really, how am I feeling? It turns out I'm actually feeling a little bit insecure, a little bit confused. So Marshall Rosenberg says, our repertoire of words for calling people's names, which we've talked about, is often larger than our vocabulary of words that allow us to clearly describe our emotional states. So we use the word feel so much, and I think we use it more and more all the time. I haven't done an analysis, but I see it showing up all the time. In fact, the NVC people now call it the F word. But anyway, I feel that this is a worthless topic. I feel like a failure. I feel as if I'm in prison. I feel like I just work and strive all the time. I feel this is useless. I feel like you don't care about me at all. Oh, and this one. I feel ignored, misunderstood, threatened, unappreciated. When you say that, you make me feel so pummeled. There's a long list of words that we use that actually are talking about what we think the other person is doing to us. Also, things we want the other person to do. Oh, I actually heard somebody say this once. I feel you should leave the room right now. I feel that would be a good project for you. By developing a vocabulary of feelings, we connect more easily with one another. So what on your handout on page 6, on page 5, is and 6, a feelings inventory. Feelings when our needs are satisfied, and feelings when our needs are not satisfied or not met. So in my statement, when Sally goes and sits and works alone at her desk, rather than working with the other students, I feel confused and frustrated because I value order, connection, and clarity. I don't understand what's going on and why she's doing it when group work is so valuable. Look at your, you can look at that inventory, or you can look at your yellow card. Are there any feelings in me that you can identify with the statement I just made? How do you think I'm feeling?
Tired.
What?
Tired.
Tired. Tired. Anything else?
Stressed.
Stressed. How about your situation? How are you feeling in your example?
Concerned.
What?
Concerned.
Uncertain. Any other feelings in the example that you wrote? Anxious. And one thing that we would be doing in a workshop is you would keep working on your example. I rewrote my example to make an observation, and now I rewrote it to express a feeling. But now I really have to speed up because I want you guys to talk. So there's feelings when needs are met, not met. Basic understanding about feelings. All I want to say is I want you to know that I'm responsible for my feelings. You did not cause them. I even hear mothers saying to their children, "You make me so embarrassed when you do that." Well, actually, you might be feeling embarrassed, and I could understand that, why you would, but it's actually your feeling. And no one made you feel embarrassed. So we can let each other off the hook a lot by just being responsible for our own feelings. Okay, and then are these expression of feelings? I actually put, I think it's on page 11 of your handout, I gave you an exercise that could be done in a group, which is to say, is it page 11? Are these expressions of feelings? Yes or no?
Yes.
And if they are, and if they're not, let's rewrite it to be an expression of feeling. And I did that with observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And we could look at our examples. Okay, understanding needs. So needs and values, this is the fourth, O-F-N-R. Needs and values are words that describe the life-giving energy that motivates and sustains us. So here are just some things about needs. All behavior is an attempt to get our needs met. Wow, what a radical statement. All behavior and all talk is an attempt to get our needs met. All these expressions are tragic expressions of an unmet need. We talked about that already. Why is it tragic? Because I'm not going to get my need met by calling you an idiot. Probably not. If I had a need for connection, and you just continue to walk away from me, and you never look at me, and I say, well, I could think of a lot of things I could call you, but I won't say them right now, because I could call you any number of names. Am I going to get connection out of that? No. At the core of our anger is a need that's not being fulfilled. When we begin to talk about what we need rather than what's wrong with the other person, we can start to connect. Also, we all have basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've all studied that, we know it. And then Maslow expressed in a different way, and also William Glasser talks about basic human needs. There's an article, again, in the articles that I gave you in the discussion of needs, a very interesting article saying that many teachers think that students' need is for mastery and achievement. And if they achieve mastery and a sense of achievement, they will be happy and they will be successful. But in fact, many of the needs that the students they're thinking about have are a sense of belonging. And we can see, we could talk about this forever, where the sense of belonging, a need to belong, is driving many behaviors that we see and that we do ourselves. We empower ourselves and others when we understand our own needs and others' needs. Look at this. This is such a radical statement, which we could talk about for a while. When we understand the needs that underlie our own and others' behavior, we have no enemies. Okay, we can't talk about that now, but I'd love to. And then needs are different from strategies. So often when we argue, what we're arguing and fighting and disagreeing about is strategies. Strategies. How are we going to accomplish this? If we go deep enough, what we can find is that both of us are actually wanting some space. We're both wanting some space, but we have very different strategies for approaching it. Anyway, there's a lot more to do with that. So 3/4 of the miseries and misunderstandings in the world will disappear if we step into the shoes of our adversaries. Whoa! Understand their standpoint, even if there's no question of our agreeing with them. We don't have to agree. If we go deep enough, though, because needs are universal, we probably will agree. So the last, okay, expressing our needs and understanding those of others can be challenging. Yeah, we could work on that. In your handout, there's an inventory of needs. So if you wonder, what am I needing? We're not very used to talking about that. In fact, we don't talk about it because what if Kevin goes around talking about what he's needing all the time? Pretty soon we go, gosh, he's an awfully needy guy. But Kevin does have needs and he needs to know what they are. Okay, then we could look at whether these are statements of needs and how we could rewrite them. We could look at my example. We could look at your example. Finally, making requests. The concrete actions that we would like to see from ourselves and others that will enrich our lives and theirs. The request can be of myself or of the other person. With my example of Sally, maybe I just have a request of myself. Am I willing to let Sally sit and work alone when others are working in groups? Or would I like to make a request of her? So often we can just make a request of ourselves. When somebody shows up late, every time we're having lunch, well, am I willing to just bring a book and let that go? Will that work for me? They're positive rather than negative. Don't be late again, okay? Well, but what do you actually want? The person, when all I say is don't be late again, the person might not even know what I'm asking for. So they're positive, they're clear and doable rather than vague. Could you please show up in the future? Could you please show some love for me and our children? I've heard that in marriage therapy sessions. He just doesn't show any love for me and my children. Well, what exactly would he do that would show that? There are requests rather than a demand. Marshall Rosenberg says, we need to ask ourselves, what do I want the other person to do, and what do I want their reasons to be for doing it? Do I want it to be because it's a requirement, because it's a rule, because it's a law? Or do I want it to be because it's bringing life to both of us? Sorry, I'm taking too long on these. There's just so much to say. It's so interesting. We could come up with a complete statement. If you feel like it when you have time, take your statement and change it, following the principles we've talked about, making an observation, expressing your feelings, your needs, and making a request. There are all kinds of things that we could do. One thing that is great is to look at a picture, and that's on your handout, and ask questions. What's happening here? What are they feeling? How would I be feeling in this situation? What are they needing? What's each person needing? What requests would I like to make if I were there? You've seen these in schools, haven't you? Another way is to bring this into schools, and I just love this when I saw it on a wall. Think, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? There's many things to say about the power of listening, about practicing empathy, differences between jackal language and giraffe language. There's a whole lot to investigate about that, really a lot. It's really fun. And the role of habits we're unaware of, unconscious bias. A lot of intentions. Okay, I'll just read this last quote and then we're done. Except I'm going to do the raffle. Anybody want to read this? I'll read it, right? Okay. Peace requires something far more difficult than revenge or merely turning the other cheek. It requires empathizing with the fears and unmet needs that provide the impetus for people to attack each other. Being aware of these feelings and needs, we lose our desire to attack back because we can see the human needs that are leading to these attacks. Instead, our goal becomes providing the empathic connection and education that will enable us to transcend violence and engage in cooperative relationships. Isn't that a great quote? Okay, do you have the card? Are you going to pull them, Kevin? I have 2 books that I would like to give to you because they're wonderful books. Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Marshall Rosenberg. It's on your reference list. Oh, you want me to pull it?
Sure, why not?
Oh, you pull it. You pull it. You pull it, Kevin, please. You will.
Oh, yes, all over the place.
Alexandra.
All right. Woo! And here's the other book, which is great. Speak Peace in a World of Conflict. What You Say Next will change your world.
I hope it's me.
Victoria.
Okay, I ran out of time. Do we have 5 minutes for discussion or no?
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
If you do have to go, you're welcome to head out, but we'll give 5 minutes to Joy.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to say anything? Yes.
Coming from the field of political science, I feel very kind of amazed by the talk. Because we claim that we want peace, but I was thinking, we know what the other side needs, but we want to trump them. We don't care. We want the power. So it is not that I don't understand what you want, that you want this territory, that you want this water supply, that you want to have your own autonomy. I know, I understand, but I don't want to give it to you. So it is not, for humans of psychology, saying that we have to practice it. It's not a matter of knowing how you can appease someone. It is whether you want to do it. You may have totally different motivations, and in economics, in business, in politics, even in public policy, you just don't want to do it because you don't want to oblige by their needs. You don't necessarily want peace. You want to have control, you want to have
Changing my approach would be helpful to me, to the people I'm trying to serve. It's just a question to ask. But it's a good point that you make.
Well, we read articles on feminism, and there is a lot about military language. And they said military language is to rape this country, yes, and the other country is always she. And we are raiding it. And it is deliberately vulgar, sexualized, macho, and overwhelming. And everybody knows that this is. But if you don't use this language in military situations, you look like Flake and basically the coward among us. So this very vulgar language creates a sense of community, and it is deliberately installed there and it's kind of kept in its own. So it is community building thing.
Yeah. I actually wrote an article for a military magazine because I went to one of their workshops and they were talking about peace, and I said, oh, but what about the way we talk? And so I wrote an article, but some of them thought the article was flaky.
Yeah, that's, and you cannot fight this criticism.
Yes. Yeah, I'm used to it, yeah. But thank you, that's a good point. Kevin.
I kind of hate to ask the question because I think you've gotten this before, but does everybody really want peace? I mean, the quote that you had about the 3/4 of the miseries will disappear if we step inside someone else's shoes. I just can't help but think some people maybe want kind of that tension, that violence to be out there, kind of because it deflects from you, like you kind of get people to stop watching you if you have other people kind of fighting amongst themselves. So it seems kind of along the lines of what Dr. Doug was talking about, that some people want that. Some people want those kinds of things to exist out there.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually used to say everyone wants peace. And I stopped and I said, we want peace. I figured people who want peace will just say, yeah, I do. But because people would say, I don't know about everyone. But the thing that I try to do is, if I see somebody who I think doesn't want peace, is to go way deep and say, okay, they're doing certain things, they're saying certain things. It doesn't look very peaceful to me. But what are they needing? What are they wanting? What are they trying to accomplish? And sometimes what they're wanting is to be seen. Look at the list of needs that's in your handout. There's a long list of what I sometimes want too. And sometimes I can get pretty, I can talk my most fluent language is jackal talk. What? What's your problem, girl? So I can do that too, but then we stop and say, what am I needing right now? What is it that I'm needing? Maybe I'm needing some ease. Maybe I'm needing some space, some time, some rest, belonging, to be seen, to be heard. Some of these people who we judge as enemies and violent, if we go deep, we can see that there's something much deeper there. it doesn't mean that we agree with their strategies. In fact, I was at a workshop and I was a little surprised because the workshop leader said, sometimes their strategies suck. Wow, I thought that was a little strong, but anyway, I mean, we don't have to agree with their strategies, not at all. But also, and sometimes we need to engage in, Marshall Rosenberg calls it protective force. I mean, sometimes protection is actually needed, but maybe not retribution or punishment or violence. That is our part.
Actually, I don't want to be monopolizing, but I have been thinking about it recently, and I think it is not that I should understand your needs, but what differentiates societies like American from where I come from, Eastern Europe, for example, is this layer of civility. I may not understand, but I would not personally insult you, I would not shout at you, and I can say the most difficult criticism, but it should be said in a particular way. And I found this to be a fascinating thing. Because you can say everything, but the way you say it, if you keep this veneer of civility, that's why it is so disturbing for me when they say, oh, we should not be politically, politically correct. No, we should be, because if you break this veneer and you go down, that's the moment you actually start to break society. It is not that I have to constantly measure what needs you have. In a perfect day, in a day I cannot do it. But if I still talk to you in a respectful way, even if I don't understand what's going on, I believe this is what's keeping it kind of, at the peaceful state. So it is not the motivation, but this is the approach.
Civil discourse.
Civil discourse.
We would like to have some civil discourse,
Yes.
and it would be nice if we could learn to engage in that.